other markups, third-party markups. Good Thursday. All right. This hearing will come to order. I want to welcome everyone. We normally meet on Wednesdays, and so folks try to keep their schedules available for Wednesday. On a Thursday morning, we are competing with a variety of markups today, so we will have folks that will be, I'm afraid, coming and going, but we will still gain all of this good information, and we welcome all of you here. And I particularly would like to begin by welcoming Dr. Griffin to today's hearing, and we look forward to your testimony. You've always been straightforward with me and this committee, and I very much appreciate that, as I've told you on a number of occasions. And in that same spirit of candor, I will say that what I've said before, and that is that I'm afraid that NASA is headed for a financial train wreck if things don't change. Your testimony outlines some of the challenges NASA is facing as a result of FY 207 Joint Resolution. We will explore those in more detail during today's hearing, but it's clear that NASA's problems run much deeper. And or budget problems run much deeper. Let me just list a few of them. First, the FY 2008 budget request continues a pattern of the administration's requests that fail to ask for the level of funding that the White House had said NASA would need to carry out the exploration initiative and some other core activities. Specifically, in the 3 years since the President announced his exploration initiative, the White House has cut NASA's 5-year budget plan by a total of $2.26 billion. And based on this year's budget submittal, the shortfall will worsen by another $420 million in FY09. The impact of the $2.7 billion shortfall is compounded by the administration's under-budgeting of the Space Shuttle and the International Space Station programs in that same 5-year budget. The under-budgeting forced you to take some $3.7 billion out of the rest of the agency's programs to cover that shortfall, which brings me to the FY08 budget request and its 5-year budget plan. The budget plan includes an estimated shortfall of $924 million in ISS crew and cargo services funding, a shortfall that will have to be made up one way or the other. The budget plan does not include funds to address Space Shuttle program termination and retirement costs past FY10, although NASA concedes that there may be additional cost. The budget plan doesn't include funds for the required upgrade of the aging Deep Space Network, although NASA says it will need to start funding it in FY09. The budget plan reduces the amount of Space Shuttle reserves available to address remaining shuttle program threats during the remaining missions. The budget plan contains almost no funds to initiate the series of new missions recommended by the National Academy's Earth Science Decadal Survey. The budget plan defers a significant amount of research to be done on the International Space Station and provides no grounds for optimism that the research will be adequately funded prior to NASA's planned withdrawal from the ISS program. The budget plan continues the administration's underfunding of NASA's Aeronautics program. The budget plan continues to cut back on NASA's long-term exploration technology program. For example, NASA will eliminate its lunar robot program, the precursor program for its human lunar initiative, after only one mission. And even before the Joint Resolution impact is factored in, NASA's personnel were looking at a 6-month slip in the crew exploration vehicle schedule of 2015. I could go on, unfortunately, but I think it's clear we have a budgetary situation that bears little resemblance to the rosy projections offered by the administration when the President announced the mission for space exploration 3 years ago, and a vision that is now increasingly and unfortunately blurred. And Dr. Griffin, in your testimony, you mentioned the negative impacts of the joint resolution passed to deal with the unfinished FY07 appropriations left to us by the previous Congress. I agree with you that those impacts are not good, and that's the reason that I went before our budget committee and urged them to increase the budget by over $1 billion to our authorized level. However, I'm afraid you are left hanging out by your own administration when it said nothing about NASA in the statement of admissions policy that it sent over to the House. The administration's silence, unfortunately, sent a message that it was not helpful. I will not kid you that it's not going to be easy getting the funding you are requesting in this year's budget, especially if the White House remains disengaged. Yet, based on the items I've already listed, I'm worried that even getting the President's requested level is just going to push the looming budgetary problem down the road until the next election. And so today, I'd like to find out at least the following. Given your assessment of the negative impact of the joint resolution, did you ask the White House to weigh in with the House of Representatives? If so, why not? If you think submitting a budget request with a shortfall of almost $1 billion in ISS crew and cargo funding embedded in it makes sense, was it your idea or OMB's? Given the agreement I thought NASA had with OMB on the ISS and the shuttle funding last year, why did this year's budget request come over with shortfalls and reduced reserves in the shuttle and the ISS accounts? Did you shift the money, or did OMB change the agreement? Well, we have a lot to talk about, and I'm sorry to start off on such a negative, I won't say negative, but a difficult posture, but these are issues that are very important, and we need to know more about them. Thank you.
Chairman, I thank you, and I'd like to also welcome our NASA Administrator, Dr. Michael Griffin, to this very important hearing. And as I've said many times before, NASA's in the business of doing difficult and challenging tasks, and our country looks to NASA to inspire us and to push the boundaries of exploration. Mike Griffin understands this. We're fortunate to have such an intelligent man and focused man leading the agency because NASA faces tough challenges ahead. NASA actually performs best when it has a clear mission. In my opinion, they have a clear mission. A mission they shouldn't retreat from. The vision was established a few years ago when the economy wasn't as strong as it is now. Today the economy is strong, and the time will come when the stresses and strains of the Iraq war are going to subside. I'd like to see NASA press on. Don't be bullied into a compromise that might cost us our allies. Those are some of the things that we hope you'll remember. In the aftermath of the Columbia tragedy, we all recognized that NASA needed a clearly defined, affordable mission, and a mission that would take us beyond the low Earth orbit. After careful study, the administration proposed a vision for space exploration, which I support, and which this committee and the entire Congress endorsed through the NASA Authorization Act of 2005. That consensus gave NASA the stable direction that it had lacked. Since the vision was first announced, two major financial obstacles have occurred. First, earlier estimates for the remaining shuttle flights understated the cost by roughly $3 billion. Second, the 5-year budget run-out presented at the time the vision was announced assumed a higher funding profile. In the years since, the administration requests for NASA have come in lower, and unfortunately, Congress failed to fully fund the FY 2007 request. Everyone bears some blame for the funding shortfalls, but the point I want to stress is that NASA continues to hold to its original schedule for the vision, but doing it with smaller budgets. Consequently, the stress on the agency is enormous. In our own NASA authorization bill, written after the vision was announced for 2008, we authorized $1.4 billion, more than the administration has requested. Mr. Griffin, I never have been, and I will never be critical of your performance. You're doing a superb job, and I don't know of anyone better qualified to lead the agency. But I'd certainly encourage you to talk to your friends at OMB, to Rob Portman, who's a class guy and a former member of this Congress, and to the White House, and tell them that NASA's friends on Capitol Hill are growing concerned that the agency is squeezing too hard and will suffer for it unless realistic budgets are presented. Congress supports the vision. Congress certainly supports NASA's science and aeronautics programs, but if forced to choose between science, aeronautics, or human spaceflight, I'm not sure at the end of the day what the final choice would be. As one who believes in the necessity of having a robust human spaceflight program, I want to work with you to ensure we have the CEV flying by 2014. The brave men and women we ask to explore space deserve the best equipment and the safest spacecraft we can build. I thank you, sir, for coming before us, and I look forward to hearing your testimony to help us understand how NASA plans to manage these challenges. Mr. Chairman, I thank you, and I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. You know, during the last couple of years, I think Chairman Sherry Bowler and I could have exchanged opening statements many times and not known the difference. I think you and I certainly would have welcomed to have given that same opening statement today. I think we're very much in tune. And now the chair recognizes Mr. Udall.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Given your comments, it's tempting to just submit my statement for the record as well, but I think I'll go ahead and present it to Dr. Griffin, because I too agree with Judge Ralph Hall and our chairman, Mr. Gordon. Dr. Griffin, always great to see you. Thank you for coming up here today. As you know, this is the first formal review of the 08 budget request, and we're, of course, looking forward to your testimony. You've got a tough job, and we need to understand the basis of the decisions you're making, as well as any concerns you have about the budget. As I mentioned, I agree with Chairman Gordon's assessment of the situation we're facing. It's going to be a tough year to get the resources that we need for space and aeronautics, but all of us are going to make the best effort that we possibly can. And we're going to do so because NASA's space and aeronautics programs are a very important component of our overall R&D enterprise throughout this nation. And I think there's an agreement across the board we need to be investing more, not less, in these areas. On Tuesday, we held a hearing on science and technology leadership in the 21st century global economy, and we heard a distinguished panel of witnesses stress the importance of investing in basic research if we're going to remain competitive in this nation. And NASA's space and earth science basic research activities, along with microgravity research, are prime examples of research investments that can not only advance our knowledge but benefit society. And it should be noted, I think we all agree here, that the investments also play a critical role in educating the next generation of scientists and engineers. Aeronautics R&D, we've discussed that at some great length, is another area where investments we make benefit our economy, our quality of life, and our national security. And when we fail to invest adequately in a range of basic and applied aeronautics R&D, as I fear we're doing in this budget, we foreclose future options and fail to meet future needs in ways that we are likely to regret. Human spaceflight and exploration is another area that offers benefits, ranging from the very important intangible inspiration it provides to the public to the advanced technologies and research results that can come from those initiatives. So in sum, I strongly support a robust budget for NASA, but as I mentioned earlier, I just don't think we're getting the budget requests that are matched to the tasks we want NASA to undertake. And those stresses resulting from the past shortfalls are now reinforced by the funding plateau imposed in Fiscal 07 by the joint resolution. And Doctor, I know it's your job to put the best face on the budget that you have to defend, but as Judge Hall and Chairman Gordon mentioned, we need to know where the stresses are, as well as the deferred opportunities that result from this budget request. And as an example of that, last month we heard from the National Academies about their recommendations for future Earth science research and applications missions, something that we all care deeply about. However, as I look at the out-year budget request, I see very little that would give me confidence that NASA will be able to undertake any substantial fraction of the recommended missions for the foreseeable future. Another example is the International Space Station. You've testified that NASA expects to cease funding the ISS after 2016. Yet the budget plan continues the deferral of any significant investments in the ISS research through the 5-year budget horizon associated with the fiscal year 08 budget request. And the research plan still contains no clear research objectives and associated milestones to complete the needed research during the space station's operational life. And that troubles me, and it raises questions about the administration's stewardship of this unique life limited orbital research and engineering facility in which the country has invested so much to build. Again, I don't fault you for attempting to prioritize within a hopelessly inadequate budget, but we here in the committee and in Congress have to step back and consider whether the administration's approach to the nation's civil space and aeronautics R&D enterprise is credible and supported by the needed resources. And your testimony today will help us gather the information needed for the tough decisions that lie ahead. Again, let me join Chairman Gordon and Judge Hall, and thank you for your service, and I look forward to your testimony and, as importantly, continue to work with you. Thank you.
I think Mr. Calvert holds the record here, current record for going to the most NASA centers, and so he brings us a lot of good knowledge to the committee, and he is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, as my former ranking member and now my chairman probably knows, there's a lot of golf courses near each one of those centers, so we try to see every one of them. Mr. Chairman, I want to certainly welcome the NASA Administrator, Mike Griffin, to this important hearing today. The American people are lucky to have such a well-qualified administrator during this exciting and challenging time in NASA's history, and it is a challenging time for the agency. NASA is in a budgetary vice that is making it extremely difficult for the agency to successfully meet the many demands for its diverse portfolio of missions. The demands of the agency are legitimate and critical to maintaining the global leadership our nation has held since Neil Armstrong first walked on the moon back in 1969 in the areas of human space exploration, science, and aeronautics. In 2004, the President unveiled a bold vision for space exploration to be implemented by NASA, which I strongly support. The vision gives this nation's human space program the direction it has lacked, arguably for several decades, and lays out an approach for long-term space exploration with measured milestones. During my subcommittee chairmanship in the 109th Congress, I developed a clear understanding of the many trials, budgetary, organizational, political, and technological challenges facing NASA as it implements the vision and works to balance the needs of its many stakeholders. In 2005, Congress passed the first NASA Authorization Act in 5 years. That process underscored the lack of funding, which is the key factor blocking the agency from realizing its highest potential in all its core mission areas. As made clear in the 2005 Act, the committee sought to provide NASA with the rules and tools to thrive as a multi-mission agency with robust, cutting-edge activities in human exploration of space and space science, earth science, and aeronautics. For FY 2008, the Act authorizes $18.7 billion for NASA to achieve these programs. Unfortunately, as we've heard, the FY 08 budget request seeks just $17.3 billion for NASA, substantially less than the authorized, but still a 3% increase that is well above many other agencies within the discretionary budget. Nevertheless, this disparity, paired with the agency's FY 07 appropriations reduction of $545 million, jeopardizes NASA's ability to substantially accomplish its portfolio of mission. And it comes at a time when other countries, such as China, are eagerly ramping up their own space aeronautics program. Their recent ASAT strike should remind us all that the second space age will be crowded and competitive. Now we can all argue who's at fault for NASA's quandary, but really the blame belongs to all involved parties: NASA, past and current administrations, the Congress, and the best way to resolve the situation is move beyond the blame game and toward a coordinated effort to secure a top-line budget for the agency that's closer to the authorized amount and consistent with the breadth of programs, projects, and missions. This committee must be instrumental in that effort, so I call on my Science Committee colleagues to work in a bipartisan fashion and aggressively educate our peers who are not familiar with NASA's activities and the importance of the robustly funded civil space agency. For an agency that has made immense contributions to the quality of life, our economy, and international relations, a little more than 0.5% of the total federal budget investment we are providing is just not sufficient. NASA stakeholders must stop fighting each other for a larger piece of the NASA pie and work on securing a bigger overall NASA pie. Administrator Griffin, I don't envy your predicament to manage our civil space agency under such daunting and budgetary circumstances. As you know, there's justified frustration with many of my colleagues, but I'm certain that no one can be more frustrated than you. I have every confidence in your ability to lead NASA at this time and to make the hard decisions as required by the budgets ultimately provided. I do believe, like so many others, that you are clearly the right person for the job. I look forward to your important testimony, which will lay out next year's budget, as well as give us insight into the out years. We will continue to work with you to provide NASA the constitutional or congressional resources and support needed to advance our nation's civilian space and aeronautics and agency works. We have the building blocks for a fantastic space and aeronautics program, and this country should be second to none in those endeavors. With that, I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Calvert. And once again, I think you can see there's unanimity in our thoughts here, and I want to echo Mr. Calvert's when he says that we have to work with the other members outside this committee. We are going to have a challenge on the House floor when it comes, and there will be, whether it's a motion to strike, whether it's a motion to change, we're going to have a challenge at that time, and we need to work together. We've already started in a bipartisan way talking with the appropriators so that we can try to move forward, and we'll join this committee with them earlier. I really would, even thinking about having some joint hearings with the appropriators, because this is going to be a tough one, and we're going to have to work together. And again, I don't want to get into the blame game, but I do want to say we need the president to help us. And I mean, that's part of it. We can't do it well, I won't say that. It would be very difficult to do it without the administration and OMB's help. And so we need to all get on this together, because it's going to be a challenge. If there are members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statements will be added to the record. And at this time now, I would like to introduce our witness today, our only witness, and that's Director and Administrator, Dr. Michael Griffin. He's no stranger to this committee, and as we've said on a number of occasions, he's straightforward and candid. And Dr. Griffin, let me remind you that we all recognize you are the messenger, and it is not our effort to shoot the messenger. And so please keep that, as I know that you will, in mind. We just wish you had a better message. We yield, and you may proceed. I can understand you not wanting for us to hear this, but you do need to turn your microphone on.
Sorry, Chairman Gordon, Mr. Hall, thank you for having me here today. I was about to say I'm a big boy, and I think I can take the beating with a smile. I had a written opening set of remarks that I would, at this point, like to enter into the record rather than to read, to give you back the most amount of time. I'd like to make a couple of very brief remarks. The substance of my written remarks was to the point of asking for your strong support to get the full President's request. I see that is not quite the topic on the table today, so let me enter this for the record and make just a couple of brief remarks. First of all, I think it needs to be said that there are two ways to approach a problem of budgeting. We must first have a strategy, and I want to remind you that when the Columbia Accident Investigation Board released their findings, they made a couple of very significant statements at the strategic level that went beyond the root causes of the problem. One of the things they said was that the U.S. civilian space effort has moved forward for more than 30 years without a guiding vision. They also expressed dismay at how previous attempts to develop a replacement vehicle for the aging shuttle represent a failure of national leadership. Now, I agreed with those statements. I agreed with those statements in testimony to this committee as a private citizen. And they were damning statements, citing as they did a lack of leadership in space policy in this country that had gone on for a couple of generations. I think we now have the strategic vision that will tie this agency and our space and aeronautics program together. I think we have the right strategic vision. And I certainly appreciate with you that if that is the right strategic vision, which I hear no one objecting, if that's the right strategic vision, it is certainly true that one can adopt a budgeting approach to say, what does it take to purchase all of the things in that vision? The other budgeting approach that one can take, which this administration has taken, is to say that we will allocate a generous budget, generous in comparison to other domestic discretionary agencies, and we charge you, the administrator, with preparing the best program that you can that will fit within that budget. And that, sir, is what we have done at NASA. We have the administration requires of me that I carry out the best space and aeronautics program that can be done for the budget dollars to be made available. I have submitted to you a balanced budget that respects all of our portfolios, but nonetheless adheres to that guiding vision which came out of the tragedy of Columbia. It is $17.3 billion. It is 3.1% above last year's request, and it is well above the average domestic non-defense discretionary program. It does reflect a strong commitment by the administration to NASA. It does not purchase all of the things that all of us would like to purchase. But that is a fact of life in public life as well as private, and I'm here to defend that budget as best I can do. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. At this point, we'll open our first round of questions, and the chairman recognizes himself for 5 minutes. You do have a dilemma, but the budget doesn't even recognize what the president is asking you to do. I mean, it's not a matter of what we want to do. I mean, certainly we'd like to do even more, but the budget doesn't even pay for what you're asked to do. That's what we're talking about. We're not trying to get into some la-la land of Christmas trees. We're talking about trying to do what you're charged to do, and that's where somewhere we have to decide: are you being charged too much? And also, you had mentioned that it was obvious that we don't support the president's proposal. That's right, we don't. We support the authorizing level, not the president's level. And we would like for you and OMB to try to get to the authorizing level rather than president's level, so it wouldn't be as tough. So I just wanted to try to get ourselves the right perspective. Now, Dr. Griffin, it was my understanding when you testified before the committee last year that you had reached an agreement with OMB to correct for the under-budgeting that had occurred in the space station and the space shuttle accounts prior to your arrival at NASA. And it's my understanding that the FY07 budget request and the 5-year run-out reflected that agreement. However, just a year later, we have been presented with a NASA budget request for FY08 that, according to NASA's own data, includes an estimated shortfall of almost $1 billion in the ISS crew and cargo service funding, does not include funds to address the space station program termination and retirement costs past FY 2010, and although NASA concedes that there will be additional cost, it reduces the amount of space shuttle reserves available to address remaining shuttle program threats during the remaining missions, and it reduces the reserves available to the ISS program during the most challenging assembly phase. Would you agree that this is an accurate description of that budget request, or that FY08 budget request?
I can't agree or disagree specifically. I can talk about specific points of that with you. With regard to...
was just for lack of time, did anything I state there, did you find that wasn't accurate?
No, sir, I did not find any inaccuracies in your statement. We did reach agreement last year within the administration to budget to replace the previous placeholder estimates for shuttle and station completion, shuttle flyout and station completion. They were about, and I would like to correct the record of some earlier statements that were made during the opening statements. The overall shortfall was about $5.6 billion in the shuttle and station account, which is, on the record from last year. And we were able to reduce that to a number on the order of $3.8 billion because the exploration architecture that we advanced had considerable synergy with today's shuttle fleet. So by that means, we reduced the overall problem down to about $3.8 billion, and we did reprioritize within the NASA budget with the assistance and concurrence of the Executive Office of the President to produce a budget which addressed those shortfalls. We did absolutely do that. And the budget, the 07 budget run out that we brought you last year, the 07 request, addressed everything that station and shuttle were understood by the best minds we had to allow us to finish out the program. The $924 million in crew cargo to which you refer represents a lien for transportation services against the program after shuttle retirement because of a very simple fact. When we were planning in the United States to fly the shuttle indefinitely, then transportation to the space station of crew and cargo was essentially a free good to the space station program. Now that we are retiring the shuttle in 2010, we must purchase transportation services.
Well, I agree with that, and I think you are doing it in the most efficient way. But we still have a shortfall, and again, I'm concerned that
so that does represent a lien against the program, which it is a management challenge we have taken to try to find $924 million.
So there is that shortfall then.
There is that lien.
And was it your ideas, or since there was an agreement last year with OMB, apparently that agreement hasn't been kept. So was it your idea to change it, or was it OMB's idea?
Well, we have, as you might appreciate, a multitude of discussions in the 8 months or so that we take to prepare the budget within the administration, and I do not and cannot disclose or discuss which ideas came from which parties, or which individuals, but the end result was that we have a management challenge to find $924 million within the manned spaceflight accounts to address.
I think the end result, though, is that the agreement that was reached with OMB wasn't honored. That's the end result. And also, as you know, the Columbia Acts Investigation Board documented the negative effects of the schedule and budgetary pressure on the shuttle program. And now we have a space station and a shuttle program that are under pressure to complete the ISS assembly by the time the shuttle is retired in 2010. At the same time, we have a budget request before us that reduces the shuttle and station reserves and includes a $1 billion shortfall in the funding needed to sustain the station after 2010. And I guess I should say, why should I not be worried that we're seeing parallels to the environment that the cave warned us about earlier?
I understand your concern, sir, and we have addressed that. Of the $924 million that we believe, based on existing prices for commercial service, we've budgeted the $924 for through the run out to buy the services we need. Of that, $300 million approximately is will be sought within space ops, and the $600 million will be sought within exploration systems. So on an annual basis, we're talking about average of $60 million a year within the space station and space shuttle accounts to provide that transportation service. And I would not have allowed that to be imposed on space ops if they had not stepped forward and said they thought they could find the money. So with regard to safety of the shuttle and station programs, in respect of the budget allocated to them, I think they're okay. The larger issue is, of course, what does an additional $600 million from the exploration account? The larger issue is, what does the additional $600 million cut to the exploration account do to the delivery of the CEV and the Orion and the Ares vehicles, and we're still working through that.
as you can hear, we have votes going on, so I want to let Mr. Hall move forward. You know, I don't in any way want to infer that you would ever have an unsafe mission. That will not occur. I just remember as hard as, or as much as I wanted to dunk the ball when I was playing basketball, I wasn't able to. Sometimes we can be asked or want to do more than we are able to. I do not want to get us in a situation where at a later date you have to say this is not safe, and so that's what I'm trying to avoid. And now
I understand, and I do understand, sir. I truly do, and I believe that we are okay within space ops on our budget line. We have prioritized shuttle and station above other things in order to complete that commitment. We are still assessing the consequences of that prioritization on the other things.
I yield to 5 minutes to Mr. Hall.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try not to take the full 5 minutes. I think, Mike, that money is so important and something we have to really be aware of at all times and in all budgetary trust. I've often heard it said that money ain't everything, but it sure keeps you in touch with your kids. Well, I know that we got to be totally aware of the funds that we're asking for and the funds that we're going to appropriate. But something that keeps biting at me and something I keep having to know, the next thing the American people are interested in is the safety of those that still are flying a fragile mission, and that we know that, and we're reminded of that some couple of years ago. As you know, I've always been concerned about...
Mr. Hall, would you yield?
I do yield.
We only have one vote. Mr. Lamson, would you go on and vote, if you don't mind? We only have one vote. You go, if you would go on, and then you can come back, and we will impose as little as possible on Dr. Griffin.
Yeah,
And anyone else that would like to, we're going
we can wait.
to Udall, maybe he can get through his. But any the rest of you, if you want to go on, you can come back and be ready to ask questions. Excuse me, Mr. Hall.
Yeah, I'll take the chair for you if you get Okay, we'll get back on now. For several years, I've been frustrated by the fact that the shuttle couldn't be modified with the crew escape system, and it couldn't for two reasons. One was the amount of money it would have cost, and the other was the physical inability, weight-wise, to do it. It just was not possible. We could never say there's not no amount of money was too much for safety, but the physical facts kept us from doing that and still keep us from doing it. But I understand that one of the benefits of the crew exploration vehicle is the ability to jettison the entire crew module if there's a catastrophic accident. Please assure us that the crew escape system planned for the CEV is robust enough to safely jettison the entire crew to safety in the unfortunate event of a catastrophic accident, and will this system be functional throughout all phases of the powered flight?
The answer to your question is unequivocally yes.
Great. That's all I'd like to hear. I want to ask you about another mission. The Sophia mission is moving forward, as you know, but your statement indicates the program has remaining hurdles. Now, I'm getting fairly tired of remaining hurdles on Sophia when we're 90% complete on it and have 10% to go. Surely we're not going to have any hurdle. If it's a hurdle, it's a low hurdle and not a high hurdle. And that's such an important program. And management review is going to be held again after this spring. Is that right? Is that what your testimony was?
Let me give you a quick couple of minutes on the status of Sophia.
Give me a good answer as you gave to my first question.
It can't be as short. I'm sorry, sir, but I'll make it as short as I can. We did a very careful review of the Sophia program last year. We determined that the airplane modifications, due to changing external situation, United Airlines had gone out of the business of modifying airplanes. We needed to put the Sophia airplane modification program at Dryden, which is where our experimental aircraft work is located. The airplane modifications are now going much better. We expect to be on the verge of our first certification flights within months. We think we have a solid handle on getting the airplane to work properly.
Yeah.
The German scientific payload is ready, so it's a matter of finishing up on the airplane and integrating the payload. We will do that. The science management operations group that you were referring to in your question
Yes, sir.
meets, I think, next month or in May. I think they meet in May. They will be looking forward to how to operate the observatory. I think we've got Sophia back on track.
Yeah, that's great. Seemed like we had almost 600 million in it, and it's about 90% complete. Somewhere along it, those aren't exactly figures. The
program was
percentages are probably correct.
The program was in great distress. I think we're now okay.
I thank you, and I yield back my time.
Gentlemen, Dr. Griffin, I would at this point yield myself 5 minutes. In your testimony, you state that due to the cumulative effect of a number of factors, including the somewhat infamous now joint resolution for fiscal year '07, that NASA is unlikely to bring the CEV online in 2015. The briefing material indicates that independent of any joint resolution impacts, the CEV program is already looking at a 6-month delay, which would slip the operational date to March 2015. Could you explain the specific reasons for the 6-month delay?
Yes, sir. And I will, in fairness, state at the outset, I'll reinforce your point that it's an accumulated set of circumstances, one of which was the extra funding needed last year to complete the space station and space shuttle flyout that we talked about just a few moments ago. That, of course, was a major factor. But added to all of that, the net programmatic effect of reducing by some, almost $600 million. The joint continuing resolution reduced the money available for the CEV program by almost $600 million over the next 5 years. So that's a fact, and the schedule slip that goes with that reduction is about 6 months.
Now, on top of that delay, the joint resolution could result, we understand, in another 4 to 6 month delay. Is that correct? And what will determine the length of the delay due to the joint resolution?
That was about 6 months, yes, sir.
So it's not a cumulative 12 months. It's still
no.
6 months.
The effect of the joint resolution by itself, that particular reduction in ability to obligate funding, just the joint resolution, that effect is about 6 months. So we have several effects, and that one is there.
So there are two effects, and you believe it'll total up to 12 months, or you think the two cumulatively will result in?
No, there are a number of different things which have gone on over. Let me take you back again a couple of years as briefly as I can. In the '05 budget, the administration planned for the start of the CEV program. At that point, or from that point, we have had reductions, as the chairman noted earlier, in the amount of funding budgeted to NASA. We have had reductions in CEV funding, which have been necessary to pay for shuttle and station. We have had rescissions due to Katrina, and we have had rescissions due to other reasons. And so the combination of all of these things had, up to that point, delayed the CEV out to the very end of 2014. No one funding reduction is more responsible than the others. It's just that there was a chronological sequence, and the last one to be applied was the continuing resolution, and that is the most recent delay, not the only delay, and the magnitude of that delay was about 6 months.
So at this point, we're looking at September of 2015?
March of 2015.
March of 2015. You're holding fast at that?
Yes, sir.
Great. If I could, let me move to the National Academy's recommendations around a series of new Earth science and application missions. And while I recognize that it may not be possible to do all of the proposed missions at the rate recommended And I also acknowledge that some of the Academy's cost estimates may be optimistic. I don't see anything in the '08 budget request and run out that would allow NASA to make any kind of a credible start on these new missions. What priority do you attach to the missions recommended by the decadal survey, and do you have any plans to initiate any of the new missions recommended by the survey?
The answer I would give you is exactly the same as the answer I would give you for any of our 4 science portfolios. Our priorities are strongly influenced by the decadal surveys that we get from the National Academy. We do respect those. I've said that on the record any number of times. I think it is important that we do so. The National Academy is as close to the National Academy is as close to a governing body of science in this nation as we are, I think, ever going to get. That said, every one of our 4 portfolios has a decadal survey now, and every one can use up by itself the entire science budget. So we cannot do every mission on the Earth Science Decadal with the money that we have, just as we cannot do every mission on the Astrophysics Decadal or Heliophysics Decadal or Planetary Science Decadal. So we will use the decadal prioritization to inform the sequence in which we do our Earth Science missions. We have already used it to plus up the funding for GPM, and we will continue to use it. But we cannot immediately start a program which is going to go and execute every single Earth Science mission on the decadal.
So, Doctor, I don't hear you saying you have plans to initiate any of the new missions recommended by the survey. Is that correct? I want to make sure the record reflects.
I'll have to take that for the record. I'm not sure what the next mission that we would initiate would be. Anything we initiate will be in conformance with the priorities of the decadal survey.
Thank you. I look forward to reading your response for the record, and at this point we'll temporarily recess the committee until the...
Okay.
There's a vote on... There's about 2 minutes left. You and I are running. So we'll temporarily recess, and we'll be back shortly.
I'll be here. Thank you.
The committee will come back to order. We thank all of you for your patience, and Mr. Calvert is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator, if the shuttle is retired in 2010, and I assume that we're on schedule to do so, and the CEV is not operational until 2015, as NASA budget predicts, there could be a minimum of a five-year delay in our human space flight capability. The last time we had an extended hiatus between the Apollo and the shuttle programs, as you know, we paid a tremendous price in the loss of the aerospace industries and workforce. In order to assure that we do not have further slips in the CEV, it is vital that we maintain the funding for the exploration systems. The FY08 is a pivotal year. If we do not quickly come to grips with the funding problems and the gap in the human space flight capability extends even further than currently planned, I believe we face the risk of losing our young and talented workforce to other industries. We must focus on maintaining funding for exploration, because without some expectation of certainty in the program, people will either choose or be forced to leave the industry. But today, unlike the late 60s and early 70s, we now face increasing competition from China, Russia, India, and others, countries that may have agendas very different from our own. An extended gap in America's spaceflight capabilities could lead to an erosion of our workforce and our industrial supplier base, and I'm very concerned about this. So my question, Doctor, do we risk more than loss of jobs as a result of an extended hiatus? Do we risk losing our technological leadership in a vital industry as well? If we start to lose our workforce, do we run the risk of increasing the gap further because we don't have the talent we need to get the job done? And also a number of questions, but can you provide us your views on that subject?
Yes, sir. I think it is clear to all those who are in or who observe the high technology sector of this country, of which, of course, space exploration and development is one, that that the best people tend to go where the emphasis is clearly being placed. And I do worry that if we appear to have an unfocused space program, that we will lose people. And I consider that to be an issue. So that was your last question, but I'll answer it first. It does concern me very greatly. To the point of your other questions, I've said many times, beginning during my confirmation hearings, that I believe that the American space program is one of this nation's strategic assets in the world. It is one of the things that distinguishes us, sets us apart from, and frankly sets us above many other societies. Our ability to do things that other people can only dream about matters. It matters greatly. And when we compromise it, we compromise our nation's position in the world. I believe that. When we terminated Apollo and initiated Shuttle, then as now, we didn't have the money to do those two things together. So there was a 6-year gap that developed out of what was originally planned to be a 2-year gap in human spaceflight capability. Programmatic slips took care of the other 4 years. Today, at a comparable state in the program, we're looking at a now nearly 5-year gap in human spaceflight capability, but it's at a different time. In the 1970s, we had one competitor, the then Soviet Union, and in what was viewed as a race to the moon, we had won. In today's world, energy dollars are flowing into Russia. Russia loves its space program, as they should. They have kept it despite tremendous exigencies, and they've supported it. Chinese now have the capability to put people in space. India has announced its intentions to join the Chinese. Other nations could do it if they chose to as a matter of political will. They certainly have the capability and have the money. So I fear for our nation's posture as a nation among nations when we allow this capability to be mitigated or damaged in any way, which is why I have urged full support for the President's budget so that we can minimize any disruption. There will be disruptions, but I would like to minimize it.
Chairman, if he has a half a minute left, could I ask a gentleman a question?
Absolutely.
I'll yield all my time to you, Mr. Chairman.
You know, I think you were here when we lost the super collider, and we had it with tunnel dug and X billions of dollars into it. And when it came time to reauthorize it, they asked for, it's my best recollection, it was $600 million to keep it going. And we had $200 million for them. And because they thought they could force Congress into keeping that program alive, and they should have been able to, they weren't able to, and they held on to demanding what they had, when $200 million would have kept them alive, and we'd be having it operating by now and be a leader in the technology fields of the world. We have a hole in the ground there now and a huge amount of money spent. Nothing. I think we ought to learn from that and support this program and support it the way they've set it out and pull our hat down over our ears and ride this thing out.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Mr. Lamson is recognized for 5 minutes.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Dr. Griffin. It's a pleasure to have you here. It's always nice to see you. And I have to make a comment about the opening remarks of all of our colleagues and how I want to associate myself with what everyone said. I think that this is a wonderful opportunity for this committee to make a big difference right now because of the unity that we do have, and I look forward to working with you. I'm proud also to serve as the representative of Johnson Space Center. And I can't think of anything that is as important, not just to that area of Texas where Johnson Space Center is, but that NASA is to our nation, as Mr. Hall was just now saying. So it's a pleasure always to consider these problems that we face and see if we can't find the right ways to address them. I certainly want to. Your prepared statement notes that previously underestimated cost to retire transition to retire or transition the space shuttle and to support the International Space Station. The reduction from FY07 request reflected in the FY07 continuing resolution and the maturing design and integrated flight test baseline for the Constellation program have affected the ability to deploy Orion and Ares by 2014. And in previous testimony to the Senate Subcommittee on Space, Aeronautics, and Related Sciences, you remarked that the CEV-CLV program will slip into 2015, and you just said it again just a minute ago. What is the bottom line dollars, the additional funding that NASA needs for 08 to maintain the 2014 CEV-CLV launch date?
I answered that question for the record for that Senate testimony to which you refer, and I'll give you the same answer here. The funding we would need to return the Orion and Ares systems, the CEV, to a 2014 capability is not needed in 08. It would be needed in 09 and 10. And the funding requirement would be $350 million in 09 and $400 million in 10. Okay, so that's the direct answer to your question.
Okay, thank you. And the effect, what effect will slipping the date if we don't do that of the first initial operational, the IOC, the initial operational capability, the first crewed launch, have on the nature of existing contracts for the Constellation program?
Well, we are obligating money, of course, now on the contract, the existing contract for the CEV. So if we do not in fiscal 9 and fiscal 10, and bear in mind that we start next month to prepare the budget for fiscal 9. It's not as far away as it sounds.
Mm-hmm.
So if we in fiscal 9 do not obligate additional money to buy back that schedule, then the date as we currently project it, with no further reductions, would be March 2015.
And that will ultimately further drive up the cost overall of the project.
Lengthening the program certainly does drive up the out year's cost, of course. Yes, sir.
Are you confident that NASA now understands the costs required to retire or transition Space Shuttle, support ISS, and accommodate the design and integrated flight test for the Constellation program?
I am. When I came in to this position, and I think very understandably, a decision had been made to retire the Space Shuttle in 2010 and to move on with a new system. And not everyone agreed with that, but I think the balance of the community of people who are concerned about spaceflight agreed with that. And Mr. Gordon, you and I have talked about that. The Space Shuttle will have been in service by that time. We need to move on. But for 30 years by that time, we need to move on, and we are moving on. Now, what had not been done was to properly allocate the costs necessary to fly the shuttle out until 2010. That, it's difficult to calculate what is going to be needed to fly out and retire a complex system like that. So we had placeholder estimates in the budget when I came in the door. We spent a good chunk of 2005 trying to refine those estimates, and we have, and I'm confident that we have the right estimates to finish out the Space Shuttle and Space Station program, completing it by 2010.
Thank you very much. My time's expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady from Arizona, Ms. Guilford, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Griffin, good to see you. Thanks
Good
for
to see you
being here
again, Ms.
today.
Giffords.
I represent the University of Arizona, and one of the interesting things that comes up all the time is this balance between your job in terms of manned space flight compared to research. And I know that there's great concern on behalf of astronomers and scientists, and I just think about how difficult it is to be in your position trying to balance a budget with very different objectives. So could you please address the committee on how you make those determinations in this time of a shrinking budget?
Well, these are not solely my determinations. It really is a community effort. I would tell you directly that science today at NASA, all of science, is 32% of our budget. In the early 90s, science was 24% of our budget. In the Apollo era, science was 17% of our budget. So science has grown within the agency. In the Apollo era, human spaceflight was 63% of our budget. It is 62% of our budget today. So human spaceflight has remained across decades a remarkably stable fraction of our portfolio, and science has grown. It is, in my judgment, doing well. It is at a historic high in terms of its fraction of the NASA portfolio. Within science, how do we prioritize? Well, we have 4 major science portfolios: astrophysics, heliophysics, the study of the sun and solar system space, earth science, and planetary science. And while those 4 portfolios are not identically equal in their funding, we try to balance them carefully. And so astrophysics has a good share of the portfolio, but doesn't get the whole thing, just as in my response a few moments ago about earth science. So within the astrophysics portfolio, 1 of 4, we take our priorities for missions to be done from the decadal surveys. Currently, number 1 on the decadal survey for astrophysics is the James Webb Space Telescope, and we're pushing that. Number 2 is SOFIA. We're pushing that. We hope to get both of those programs down the line and open up a new funding wedge in astrophysics by 2009. And whatever the next new astrophysics mission is, starting in 2009, it will come from the community of astrophysicists in accordance with what they judge to be the most important mission at the time that decision has to be made.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Chairman, Dr. Griffin, in terms of this 2006 National Academy report that stated that in terms of technology projects that that basically that science not being enough, and you couple that with the testimony we had a couple of days ago in terms of rising above the gathering storm and us not producing enough engineers and mathematicians and scientists. I mean, I believe that NASA's in a unique position because there's really no way to get kids or young people excited about science like space and exploration, and I mean this ability to go to places that we've never been before. How do you, when you look at your overall projections in terms of your workforce, how do you figure into educating young kids, getting kids invited? I mean, how does that figure into your budget in terms of how much allocation you can spend on that next generation and educating the sort of next group of future scientists?
Well, our primary mission, of course, is to conduct space missions of all kinds and aeronautical research missions, and I mean, that's what we are paid to do, not to determine educational strategy for the nation. It is, of course, in the role of executing space missions that I think we have our highest value, which is to provide stimulating intellectual content and fascinating things that kids can aspire to work on when they grow up. When I was a child, I was fascinated by space from the age of 5 years old onward. So I understand that feeling that you talk about, that nothing excites kids like spaceflight. Specifically to education, we're spending about $150 million a year on specific education-oriented enterprises. Now that will be reduced somewhat in respect of the fiscal '07 continuing resolution, but our '08 budget and beyond contains about $150 million a year specific to educational outreach activities. In addition to that, our science missions, when we do them, as well as our human spaceflight missions, have money set aside for education and public outreach, E&PO we call it. The total amount that NASA spends on educational activities of one kind and another is several $100 million a year. I think that's generous.
The gentlelady's time has expired. I knew you were going to be able to work in Arizona some way, but you were creative today. We're going to have an oceanographic meeting soon, and so it's going to be a challenge for you. But I know you'll find a way to get Arizona, and you do every time. Mr. Calvert, I understand, has some additional questions. He's recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, if global warming does occur, we may flood California, and Arizona will be...
Or a sufficiently big earthquake.
That's right. We could remember there was a great book written in the 70s or 60s, actually, of California falling off a cliff. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Mike, I want to kind of carry on a question I had earlier about the competition we have out there. You know, I used to be in the restaurant business. I used to look across the street and look at what my competition was doing and have a better menu and try to get customers through the door. Obviously, China may have different reasons why they're getting into space business, as we saw with the ASAT demonstration recently, which I understand they managed to clutter up outer space by, about 10% more space debris than we had previously. So that's a problem we're going to have to endure with. How far is China? You've been to China and you've seen their program. How good is their space program? And more specifically, do you think they have an opportunity to get ahead of us? Do you think they have an opportunity to even get to the moon before we do? The American public probably like to know that.
Well, China, of course, has engineers and scientists second to none, and they graduate more of them than we do. When you have a chance to interact with Chinese engineers and scientists, it is abundantly clear that they need take a back seat to no one. And and China is, if their statements are to be believed, and they tend to have a record for saying what they intend to do and then doing it. If their public statements are to be believed, they have the equivalent of about 200,000 people working on their space program. Just for reference, our NASA funding purchases the equivalent of about 75,000 people. So in terms of, I can't talk about it in terms of dollars because the two economies are so different, but if you talk about it in terms of the level of effort that they are able to bring to bear, and if you believe their statements, and I don't have any reason not to believe them because they've repeated them a number of times, then their magnitude of their space effort is about 3 times as big as ours in terms of the number of people. Now, they are starting from a position well to our rear. I mean, their human spaceflight capability is, I would characterize it as being approximately equivalent to that which we had during Project Gemini in the mid-'60s. They can put 2-3 people up in orbit. They are proceeding carefully. The intrinsic capability of their equipment is a little bit better than what we had during Project Gemini at the time, but its accomplishments so far have been about at that level. I would remind you that for us, Project Gemini was only a few years before Apollo when we went to the moon. So, and the Chinese economy today in real dollars is about twice as big in constant dollars as the U.S. economy was when President Kennedy declared the lunar goal. So as a matter of technical capability and political will, if the Chinese choose to do so, they can mount a lunar mission within, a reasonable number of years, say a decade. That would be easily possible for them to do. I cannot speculate and won't speculate on what Chinese intentions are. I just don't know that. As to capability, within some reasonable number of years, if they wished to mount a lunar mission, they could do so.
At the present time, based upon the schedule that we have to have our new CEV and program on track, what's the soonest do you think we could get back to the moon?
Well, that's a question that is difficult to answer unless one associates it with a funding level. At our present funding level, we will return to the moon around 2019.
So, based on that, it is possible the Chinese could get to the moon before we get there?
Of course, yes, sir. It is possible that they could be there before we return.
On low Earth orbit, on cargo delivery in a low Earth orbit, obviously we're retiring the shuttle in 2010. How long will do you believe in 2010 that the Russians are going to have a monopoly on low Earth orbit in the sense that they'll be able to deliver a cargo to us, or are we going to have any other opportunities to buy that service from someone else?
Right now, it cannot be said whether the Russians will have a monopoly or not. They do today. By 2010, but after 2010, as you mentioned, we have some other possibilities. We have initiated, as you know, 2 COTS demonstrations, Commercial Orbital Transportation Service demonstrations, to which we have allocated $500 million a year or $500 million total in seed capital. Now, this is not intended to cover the total development cost. It is money offered as seed capital to allow entrepreneurial firms to attract the total capital necessary to provide that service. We believe such efforts have a good chance of succeeding, and that if they do, they will be able to offer service considerably cheaper than we can buy it from established providers, and if it matures, believe me, we will take advantage of it. In fact, I think it may be said that we need for those efforts to be successful. So there are those possibilities, but by the nature of a commercial transaction, which is conducted at arm's length, this is not under the government's or NASA's control. We are providing seed capital. We are offering all help if asked for, but we are not interfering with how these companies go about their business. There are, by the post-2010 time frame, we also will be close to having capability from the Japanese HTV and shortly thereafter the European ATV for cargo services. Those, of course, will be expensive. They will not allow for crew rotation, and although they are, as with the Russians, they are in partnership with the United States on the space station program, still they are not indigenous providers.
The gentleman's time has expired. We're going to go a little out of, well, whether it's either in order or out of order, and since Mr. Robacher has not had a chance to ask any questions, and then I think Mr. Udall wants to complete some questions that he had earlier. So, Mr. Robacher, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I apologize for being in and out. Mike, you're doing a great job. It's a tough job, as everybody said. Sometimes Congress actually makes it a little tougher by basically everybody's insisting that we balance the budget, but nobody wants to make decisions here, and then everybody wants to complain when you make decisions. Your job...
I have noticed that, sir.
Right. I used to be a speechwriter for the president, and invariably the leadership would come to me and say, look, this speech is way too long. And I said, okay. And they said, and by the way, we want you to add this, this, and this to the speech. So you have a very similar problem. It's up to us to prioritize, and I know that you've had to prioritize, and you've done your very best job at it. And we can't just expect always to say you're not spending enough money, and then expect just to, well, we'll just add more money. Well, maybe we need to prioritize what programs are worth spending the money on and give you some help in that. Let me note for the shortfalls that we've had that of the billions of dollars that we have spent over the last 10 years, perhaps as much as $5 to $10 billion trying to prove global warming. Not to do anything about it, but to prove it. The end post catastrophe and the waste of those billions of dollars, and some of that can be traced back to trying to overload that satellite with missions dealing with global warming, which may or may not exist, and which leads me to my question, my first question, which is I read a recent report by NASA that showed that the polar ice caps were melting and that there is indeed warming going on Mars. Is that right?
I did see the brief synopsis of the same report.
Right.
So, yes, sir.
So there's global warming on Mars. Now, my question is then, does that mean that the warming trend that we have here may be caused by sunspots and solar activity, or does it mean that there is human-like activity going on Mars that's causing their temperature to warm? You don't have to answer that. It's
okay. Thank you. Thank you.
My second question, the one thing I want to focus in on, I've also read your recent report on a project that I helped try to kick off, which is a survey of near-Earth objects that might hit the Earth. Here again, let me note that it was a professional report. I really appreciated the job that you did and that your team did. You did a very professional analysis of where we go to catalog near-Earth objects that might threaten the Earth. Your report concluded that what the threat was and how much needed to be identified, but it also concluded that we didn't have the money to do that. Now, let me note, unlike my other colleagues, I will just say that is my priority project, but I do fully understand your answer to that. And if we're going to deal with this potential challenge, I understand that there's a 1 in 62 chance that in my lifetime, of a lifetime of a baby born today, that there will be a huge impact on our Earth of a near-Earth object that would kill millions of people. Now, 1 chance in 62. And it seems to me that we should at least be inching forward, and that when we try to prioritize our various spending programs, that should be part, that type of long-range thinking should be part of the process and should be one of our goals. And I want to thank you for that report and thank you for the good job you're doing. And I just would suggest that of the $5 to $10 billion that we have spent trying to prove global warming, perhaps if we would have spent only $500 million, which the report states, we would have a full understanding of the potential threats of near-Earth objects that might hit the Earth and cause catastrophic loss of life. And that's the type of prioritization that I'm talking about that we need to do. Now, I understand that global warming is politically trendy, etc., but we here in Congress, we don't have money to spend on everything, and we should, when we have a choice between spending it on something we can't do anything about, global warming, even if it does exist, even if it is one of those trends that go up and down over the years, with sunspots like is happening on Mars. But if we can't do this, wouldn't it be better to spend our money on trying to catalog near-Earth objects and find a method of maybe deflecting one off its path toward the Earth if we had that chance to do so? So with that, if you wanted to comment, that's fine, but I sure appreciate your job and the things that I've mentioned today. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
The gentleman's time expired, and I think I can help Mr. Griffin here. We've had a lot of, I guess, bad news discussion or economic bad news discussion, but there's one good news, and that is NASA does not have to spend any more money proving global warming. It's already been done. And now the chairman recognizes Mr. Udall for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to propose to my good friend, Mr. Rohrabacher, that if he's willing to acknowledge that we don't need to prove global warming theory anymore, we just take all that money and put it to applications that would address the problem, including energy independence and new technologies. And let's quit all the studying and just agree climate change is upon us and begin to do what we need to do.
I would be happy to hold your gentlemen's coats if you wish to go at it.
Doctor, turning to another topic that I think concerns all of us, and that's ITAR. The Space Station Independent Safety Task Force raised questions about NASA's ability to interact with our international partners. If I could, I'd like to direct a series of questions at you and then let you take your best cut. How serious is an issue has ITAR been for the ISS? What are your plans for handling those restrictions? What's your timetable for resolving any outstanding issues with ITAR? And are you making changes to any other missions or mission plans as a result of these restrictions? And I apologize for the machine gun nature of those questions, but I think they're all related, obviously.
Well, they are. Let me say yes, ITAR is a concern for space station partnerships as well as any other international partnerships that we attempt to conduct in space activities. And I would remind you that our entire human spaceflight program is involved in an international partnership, and well over half of our scientific missions are conducted in the context of international partnership. So it can be difficult. The difficulties are of two types. One is the length of time necessary to get ITAR approval to conduct even government-to-government programs, which can easily be on the order of 18 months or more from my own personal experience. And then the other thing, of course, is the question of whether or not the partnership will be allowed and the restrictions that are placed on the transfer of information. The biggest concern that I have about it is that we oftentimes end up excluding ourselves from the global marketplace in aerospace and aerospace science because of those restrictions in a way that I think keeps American industry out of the world market for these goods and services. And which does not, in the long run, of course, achieve the goal of protecting our security interests, because other nations will develop these capabilities on their own. So I have those concerns. Now, our plans for dealing with it, we are a federal executive agency, and of course I follow the directions that have been put in place by the Congress and the administration in response to the legislative environment. So we really do not have a significant voice in ITAR and export control. We comply with the regulatory environment that exists, and we work very hard to make sure that we are in compliance, because the difficulties of not being in compliance are hard to overstate. So my plan is that I comply with the ITAR regulations.
Clearly, if I could make an editorial comment, we have more to do in this regard, and I think the committee needs to spend some additional time understanding the unintended consequences of ITAR, and I couldn't agree more that we shut ourselves out of global marketplaces. And
this was a topic that the Defense Science Board attempted to take on and recently, and then I believe they had to cease because of conflicts of interest in and among their membership. But the fact that the Defense Science Board chose to take it on, I think, speaks volumes.
I'd like to turn to back to the shuttle and talk about the star reductions with which I think you're familiar. If you could discuss, and I see the time's beginning to run down, but you may have to do some of this for the record, the impact of those reductions and your plans for assessing the appropriate number and mixture of skilled workers needed to safely fly the shuttle through 2010 and then to transition to the CEV.
Let me get that for the record for you. Our transition is something we work literally every day. We discuss it with our Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel that reports also to you. They've talked about that with you, and with our NASA Advisory Council. I think that most people believe that we are really going at this, that it's a hard problem, and that we're doing fairly well. But we'll give you an answer for the record.
With the Chairman's indulgence, if I could ask two more questions for the record, I would appreciate it. In that regard, too, if you would comment for the record about any legislative tools you might want to in regard to the workforce flexibility that you may or may not need when it comes to the star reductions. And if, in fact, you do need some tools, when they might be delivered, that request might be delivered to the Congress. The second question I have for the record is one that I think has been on many people's minds, and I know you've fielded it at other times, Dr. Griffin. But this has to do with the NASA mission statement. And in the previous statement, there was a clause in there to understand, quote, to understand and protect our home planet. And that clause was eliminated in the current mission statement. And there's been a lot of speculation about why, and was there any message that was intended to be sent by doing so? And I do know my time's expired, but I would like an answer for the record.
I'll give you an answer for the record, but briefly, NASA does not have the tools to protect our home planet. We seek to understand our planet and all others, and the revised statement reflects that, but NASA is not a protection agency.
Congressman Rohrabacher thinks you have the capacity to protect our home planet, particularly when it comes to asteroids, and I do have to associate myself with his concerns. I think there are very legitimate concerns about asteroid threats.
As do I.
But thank you for the forthcoming way in which you've shared your point of view with us today. And again, I want to add my voice to those who believe you're doing an outstanding job. And it's our job to get you additional resources.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, gentleman's time expired. I will suggest that providing good information for us to adapt to threats, whether in whatever form they might be, is a form of protection. And I think that we see that Dr. Ehlers has arrived. The gentleman has 5 minutes if he so chooses.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. I'm bouncing between 3 different committees here, so I can't ask a question of extreme intelligence. But I first want to thank you, Dr. Griffin, for your good work. It's always good to have a steady hand at the helm, and sometimes that's a little infrequent in the scientific, in the governmental arena. So we appreciate you doing that. Also, just picking up on this last comment about the asteroids, there is, of course, a finite probability that one will hit the Earth at some time. They have hit the Earth in the past. But I have to confess I worry far more about nuclear weapons than asteroids. I just think the probability of improper human behavior is still unfortunately greater than the random probability of a heavenly body running into us. So I guess we have to take our pick as to which is most important. Just a question, an iconoclastic question about the space station. Is any significant research being done there? Anything that's essential to the ongoing efforts of going to the moon or to sometime in the distant future to Mars? Is there good reason to keep it going? And if so, for how long should we keep it going?
Peer-reviewed scientific research is now coming out of the space station. I can cite examples for the record, if not off the top of my head. I would remind everyone that we are still assembling the space station. It is only 55% complete.
Now, that's my next question.
That several, the European laboratory to which we have some access and the Japanese laboratory to which we have some access have yet to be in place. The European laboratory and the first of the Japanese flights will be later this year. So we're still building the station, and its full capability as a research laboratory is mostly in front of us. But we can't have a research laboratory until we get the power and the water and the air conditioning fully in place, and that's what we're doing right now. How long should the space station be sustained? I believe it should be sustained as long as the costs of its operations and maintenance, once built, as long as the cost of its operations and maintenance seem to be justified by the research which is being returned, then I think the case can be made that it should be retained. We have already committed to the cost of building it. The cost of building it is largely sunk. The cost to complete is the cost of finishing the space shuttle program out to complete the flights. The equipment is built. It is largely sitting at Kennedy Space Center, ready to be put on orbit. So, ceasing the space shuttle program, space station program today would save some money, but not much. And I think we should commit to its completion, as the President has done on multiple occasions. And when we're done, we should use it in the fashion that we have planned. And as for when the time comes that we are not getting research worth the cost of its logistics, we will know that, and it will be time to cease its operation.
And is the centrifuge going to be installed, or has that part been dropped?
The centrifuge will not be installed.
And is there a particular reason for that? Is that a cost factor, or was there a problem with building it?
We're just out of shuttle flights to deploy a centrifuge, and that particular set of equipment didn't make the prioritization.
And then what happens when you retire the shuttle? Do you expect the CEV to be the transporting personnel and equipment back and forth?
After we retire the shuttle for a period of about 4 to 5 years, we will be purchasing commercial cargo service from Russia, as well as from other nations, and hopefully from indigenous cargo providers in our own nation. We will be purchasing crew rotation services from Russia, and I hope commercial providers within our own country. But again, that's a commercial transaction, and it's not something that I can guarantee.
Right.
Right now, we are negotiating a definitized contract with Russia to provide crew rotation and cargo services out through 2012, through the end of 2011 until 2012, in accordance with the legislative relief that the Congress gave us on the SNA Act. After 2012, we will, of course, have to rethink that. In 2015, we will start flying the CEV, and if commercial providers are not available, we will use the CEV to conduct station logistics, but I have made it very clear that it is my intent that our provider of choice for crew and cargo is commercial services if those can be brought into being.
The gentleman's time has expired, and Mr. Hall is recognized for 5 minutes.
Actually, on Mr. Udall's questions, and maybe I was going to vote or something. You may have answered this. If you have, tell me. But there's some confusion about the answer to his questions. When he asked about the delay in the CEV, it's my understanding that your answer was based on the CV that the delay was delayed to March of 2015. Now, somewhere I understand that there's been a review at NASA, or new content, I guess is the word that you used, that have added content, and they still have a launch of 2015, the same date, or maybe a couple of months on down. Now, let me finish.
Okay.
And that's the same date, so I guess the question is, what was deleted to keep the 2015 goal? You added new tests or new content, and the current FY 2008 budget didn't support initial operating capability in 2014. And last month, as you said, NASA added important content to the Constellation program, including one test flight from Orion to check out orbital systems prior to flying astronauts for the first time. Of course, that's logical. And you'll be making some slippages and some changes between now and 2015. I understand that, but what would be eliminated to keep the same date, and yet there was a slippage?
I understand the question in the large, and let me, if I think I can do this in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Let me take it from the top and sketch out the whole picture, because I think anything less than a complete answer is misleading, and I just don't want to do that.
Yeah, and I found out that they'd taken from my money that I'd put in the budget $15 million to study the safety features and $150 million maybe to keep it going, that they'd taken 75 of that out to put John Glenn back into space. And I found that out when the head of NASA came and sat right where you sat there and told us about his budget. That we'd like to know ahead of time.
I'm completely forthcoming on that point.
And I was for old people going into space, too.
Well, I regard Senator Glenn as a personal hero and a valued advisor, but we're not sending him into space again with your money. So let me take it from the top. I'll start at the end point. Today we are sitting on March 2015 as what we think our launch capability will be for the CEV with crew. We have not quote, added any new content, unquote, to the program. The way that I would say that is we have finalized, after a period of about 18 months of planning, and I think a certain amount of planning is necessary, we have finalized the content that the CEV program should have. Which test flight, specifically, how many test flights do we need to do? What will each test flight attempt to do? And in fact, one of the discussions we've been having is upon which test flight will we demonstrate the abort system that you earlier expressed an interest in. But by and large, content adjustments have been, quite minimal. What we're trying to do is to lay out the very specific program that we will fly to get from here to the delivery of the CEV. We have that. That amount of program content comes with a certain cost. Now, there have been a number of delays to our hoped-for delivery date for the CEV. Let me take a couple of the larger ones. When I sat here in 2005, 2 years ago, it was my hope that we could deliver a shuttle replacement capability, the CEV, sometime in 2012. And we were attempting to do that. We laid out a plan by which that could be accomplished. We were not able to fund that plan. The first disruption to that plan was, as Chairman Gordon mentioned earlier, that it was necessary to put money into the space station and space shuttle. That, from exploration systems, that required about $1.6 billion, and that delayed us from 2012 until, and I won't be specific about the time, sometime in 2014. There were rescissions for Katrina and other purposes. That delayed us. As Chairman Gordon mentioned, the amount of money projected to be available for NASA from the administration decreased. That caused delays. The sum of all of those different delays, all on our side of the house, all on the administration side of the house, whether within NASA or not, pushed the program out to late 2014. At that time, it had been, well, we had not yet re-baselined the program since the contract had been awarded to Lockheed, and if you'll recall in earlier testimony, I had said that we wanted to do our budgeting at a 65% confidence level in contrast to the lower confidence levels that had been used in the past, and I strongly believe I have the support of this committee in doing that. So then we undertook a baselining activity to establish, with the known program content and given the prior reductions in funding and inserting the 65% confidence level requirement, what date would fall out? The date which fell out was March 2015. Now, hang on with me for just another minute more. Following that, we then had to deal with the issue of the reduction in our planned funding, not an actual cut, but the reduction in our planned funding due to the 07 continuing resolution. As I testified a few moments ago when Mr. Udall or Mr. Gordon, I now forget which, asked the question, that specific delay was an additional 6 months. That then took us from March 2015 to September of 2015. Okay? Within my own resources, within the Exploration Systems Mission Directorate, we then terminated some lower, in our judgment, lower priority activities in order to buy back some schedule for the higher priority activity, which is the CEV. That then returned us to March of 2015, which is where we sit today. So to end up, we're at March of 2015 today, but I no longer have any latitude at all within my exploration systems budget to absorb any other funding reductions. There is no lesser priority content left that I can extract from the program in terms of moving money around. Now that's a long story, and I'm sorry. I hope it was as clear as I can do it.
Thank you for that. What I gathered from that is that there was not any program or part of a program eliminated or delayed. The slippage was there, and it happened just as you put it on the record.
I think that's right, sir.
He says you did say the robotic lunar landing.
I did in order to achieve the best schedule on CEV, I did extract what I determined to be lesser priority stuff, which was the robotic lunar lander that would have followed Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter and certain advanced technology development.
So as much as a CR or that elimination, you're pretty firm as you can possibly be at this date on the date of March of 2015. I think, and I yield back my time.
And the CR by itself was a 6-month delay, but there have been other delays, and that's not the only one, and I don't want to leave the impression that it was. I also must say, for the record, that we have certainly not eliminated lunar robotics from our vision. One of the most important things we're going to do with lunar robotics is to emplace the communications and navigation structure around the moon that will tie it to the Earth orbiting communications and navigation network, and that will be crucial for the out years.
You've sure clarified it for me, and I hope it helps my friend from the West.
Very hard.
You're back. You've done very well, and I thank you for it.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. In conclusion, Dr. Griffin, as you know, there are a lot of folks that are interested in the Earth Science Application recent decadal survey. I understand that when you were answering a question I wasn't here with Mr. Udall, that you weren't prepared to say whether or not, if you're going to do any of them, not do any of them, and which ones they might be. So when can you tell us that you'll be able to give us an indication if you're going to do any of the missions, and if not, but if you are, which ones?
Well, we're working.
Fair time.
We're working on a couple of things on that, and I just want to get the plan. I've been before this committee to testify in connection with the NPOS program on other occasions, and with my colleagues, Admiral Lautenbacher and Dr. Sega. But I believe this committee is aware that the climate change research that was previously planned to have been done on NPOS as a result of the Nunn-McCurdy breach on NPOS, that climate research instrumentation is largely now removed. Okay, a few years ago, NASA's climate change research money was put toward the trilateral NPOS program, so that money is now no longer in our program. So at OSTP's request, we, along with NOAA, are prepared. We've analyzed the descoping of NPOS, and now we are working to provide a report back to OSTP on how we at NASA and NOAA will undertake to conduct the climate change research. That report is due in May. We've commissioned a National Research Council study also for this spring to assess that same question. Into this mix must go the input from the decadal. And so later in the spring, at most, well, when we receive these reports, and then for us later in the summer, we should be able to provide this committee with an assessment going forward of how 09 and beyond budget runout will be modified to take into account the loss of climate change research on NPOS and the new conclusions from the decadal. You know, bear in mind that the FY08 budget was prepared before the decadal was out. And we did modify the we had a look at the interim report on the new decadal from Earth Science, and we did adjust funding on GPM to take that into account. But the full effect of the decadal, replanning it to the extent that it affects Earth Science, won't be available in 08. It will have to start in 09 and beyond.
That's a fair answer, and we look forward to your reporting to us on that. And again, we thank you for your testimony as always. If there's no objection, the record will remain open for additional statements from members and for answers to any follow-up questions that the committee may ask of the witness. Without objection, so ordered. The hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you.